Hey, everybody. Good morning in Alberta. Good afternoon, I guess, in much of the country. And welcome to Rebel News Daily. It's an unscripted show normally hosted by our friend David Menzies, where we get to talk about the news of the day and the comings and goings here in Canada, but also around the world, completely unscripted. And today I am joined by my lovely co-host, Tamara Ugolini. Tamara, how's it going?
Hey, doing pretty well. Thanks, Sheila. How are you over there in Alberta?
Oh, just getting ready for the return to winter. It never did leave us, but if you like pop open your like news app, it's always like coming death storm from Siberia. It's coming to kill you, and then they gently remind us it's not going to be as bad as like the -50 that we had before Christmas, but apparently we're going to get a real blast of winter that never quite actually ever went away because this is northern Alberta and it's here till May.
How's that for the climate crisis and climate change? Just really in full swing there.
They keep promising me climate change, and I'm like, don't threaten me with a good time. Have you tried living here? Like, I can't wait. Please, longer growing seasons, bigger crop yields can hardly wait. Let me have that. But we should let everybody know what we're doing, and then we'll get into the news of the day because we don't have David Menzies with us to knock us completely off track. And it slows us down a little bit, but it is one of the best things about him is that he's so friendly and easy to talk to that sometimes you just end up talking and you don't get to talk about all the things you wanted to talk about. So we're currently streaming on YouTube and on Rumble and Odyssey, Getter, and Twitter. However, YouTube remains a censorship platform that demonetized us here at Rebel News. So if you want to get involved in the show and support the work that we do completely willingly here, might I suggest that you leave us something called a Rumble rant or an Odyssey hyper chat. Those are their paid chats. And if you pitch in one of those, we'll do our best to address your question, query, comment, story idea towards the end of the show after we do our best to get through this incredibly long list of stories that we need to talk about today. Tamara, why don't you pick the first thing to talk about?
Well, I am excited to share a video that came out of Hamilton, Ontario. I believe this was just yesterday.
Yeah.
There's Trudeau is on the trail there discussing world happenings, and he visited the city of Hamilton, which is actually under the mayoral overview of the ousted and failed provincial NDP leader Andrea Horwath. So you can just see for yourself just how radical left the city of Hamilton is that they elected Andrea Horwath as their mayor. And so during Justin Trudeau's visit there, he was, as we've seen all across Canada for the last few years, heckled by a convoy of protesters. So we'll start our live stream off on a light foot and show you some Trudeau heckling. I wish that we could see a better picture there of just how many people were in attendance on those two levels. I mean, I just don't understand what that must feel like as, this supposed hailed leader that just thinks that he's so popular and loved to be met everywhere you go with a convoy, really, to put it
Yeah.
nicely and contextually, of people heckling and protesting your very presence and running of the country.
Yeah, I've been around politics for a long time, just as an observer, and particularly conservative politics. And even in Stephen Harper's last days, and people insanely hated him for some reason. Like the reasons they gave didn't make any sense in my mind. Like they were still talking about his hidden agenda after like 10 years. And I'm like, it's pretty hidden. I've never seen it. But it was never like this. It was never this bad. And there are people who really, really still really love Justin Trudeau. But I think there are people who are becoming radicalized on both sides. So people who are radicalized to love him no matter what ethics violations, no matter how much money he spends, no matter how he drives up inflation, no matter how he landlocks our resources, no matter how he stomps over human rights. There are people who are going to love him. That none of it matters. But on the other side, there are people who are they just viscerally hate him. And frankly, I think they've got some pretty good reasons for it.
Mm-hmm. It's really the true believers on both sides there, and one extreme to the next. And I think it's funny that you point out that people had really silly or stupid reasons for hating Harper, but I see the difference here is that people have really stupid and silly reasons for loving or liking Justin Trudeau, right? It's he has great socks and he's always looking so stylish, and I love his hair. And he literally was voted in, to the best of my knowledge, based on those those aesthetic things, never on his merit or his intellect or policies other than legalizing marijuana. It was the fact that he had great hair and cool socks. And I mean, that just shows you the state of intellect here in Canada. But he didn't even get a majority in the last election. So that's why you're seeing now these protesters and hecklers at every stop that he makes. And I never remember seeing a leader going to places with such an entourage of security and personnel, and like 10 vehicles deep rolling in, all of them with black tinted out SUVs. I mean, maybe a couple, but having this rolling entourage of staff, I don't remember seeing that anytime prior. Maybe I wasn't paying attention, but that seems a little bit excessive in my opinion. And of course, just the need for that kind of security when you're apparently this beloved upholder of democracy.
Yeah, I don't mean to compare how the left hated Stephen Harper for the stupidest of reasons versus the very good reasons people have for disliking Justin Trudeau. I don't mean to compare them, but I just see as you rightly point out, the media would have you believe that Justin Trudeau is beloved. I think he thinks he's beloved. But when you look outside those two things, the reality is much different. People are in their respective corners on this. Either they really love him or they really hate Trudeau. And I think the country is really polarized on it. And that polarization, I think, is driven by Justin Trudeau himself, because he's made all these personal decisions all of a sudden a moral issue. Like if you don't get the vaccine, you're a bad person. You don't care about your neighbor. You don't care about protecting them. So the people who believe that, they want to stay away from those really bad people over there. And those really bad people over there are resentful of people they used to know, thinking, well, you just made my medical choice some sort of moral judgment on my character. He has driven the polarization we are seeing here. And yeah, that enormous entourage, Mr. Carbon Footprint, everybody likes me, with his like roll up of SUVs. Give me a break.
Yeah, they're not hybrid vehicles. Those are straight up gas guzzling SUVs. And like I said, 10 deep rolling with him. Probably two people, a driver and Justin Trudeau, and then a driver and some media staff, and a driver and one security detail, and one vehicle and another and another. And I mean, I would be so curious to know who fills those vehicles, and if they're actually filled with staff, or they have a couple people, they need their leg room and they need to be sprawled out, travel in style and comfort. And also I wanted to point out too that, the campaign wedge that Trudeau ran on in the last election with the vaccine mandate and making sure that he was running on this guise of upholding rights and freedoms to only be around vaccinated people, because at that time we were fed that lie that the vaccine stopped transmission, and you wouldn't pass it on to your neighbor and you wouldn't become infected with COVID-19. And so the true believers really fed into that and thought, oh, he's such he's upholding our rights and freedoms and our right to be kept safe, and he's keeping Canadians safe. And then you see how he just willy-nilly pulls out the never before used Emergencies Act and squashes the fundamental rights and freedoms of Canadians who were protesting his government's directives and policies. And then it might be a good time here to show the next clip that we have of Trudeau, where he says that he will uphold all rights and freedoms and not just the narrow-minded ones that he's upheld thus far under the guise of the science TM, because it seems like anything that goes against that or might counteract that narrative and upholding of what he thinks are people's rights to be safe or feel safe means that their rights and freedoms don't really matter. We can squash theirs under the guise of upholding yours. So maybe we can throw to the clip before dissecting it a little bit further.
I've been crystal clear on this for many, many years. I do not think any provinces should be proactively, preemptively using the notwithstanding clause. What they're doing is suspending fundamental rights and freedoms and preventing the courts from even being able to weigh in on that. As a government, we will always stand up for people's fundamental rights and freedoms. We've committed that we are going to engage at the Supreme Court in the current case on C20 on Bill 21, and we're going to continue to look at the best ways to make sure that right across the country, every Canadian has their fundamental rights and freedoms protected.
What? He used the Emergencies Act, which is basically the public safety notwithstanding clause, right? That's what the Emergencies Act is. It says all those charter rights that you have to protest together, to assemble, to express yourself, to use your bank. We're just going to take those. Also, that you have against unlawful search and seizure and arrest, detainment, all those things. We're just going to take those, put them over here, and put the full force of the government and the additional, they call them policing tools, which is just tyrannical actions of the government. We're going to do that. And you don't have recourse because we invoke the Emergencies Act, which is what using the notwithstanding clause does. But the notwithstanding clause is at least a little more restrained to the one issue where the province says, actually, we think we have jurisdiction, not you. And so we're going to use the notwithstanding clause. That's normally where it's used, when the province says, no, this is a restraining order against the feds here. We're going to do what we are elected to do. The audacity of this guy. It's
gaslighting, really. It's making Canadians feel like they are crazy for questioning his invocation of that emergency power, but also for the complete devastation of individual rights and freedoms that we've seen over the last nearly 3 years under the guise of, again, health and safety through the COVID narrative, that you better shutter your small business, we're going to ground flights, stay home, save lives. And most of that was done on a provincial level. However, the provinces receive funding and receive, as you know, all their pocketbooks come from the federal government. And so it goes without saying that really these provincial restrictions were coming top down from the federal government, because otherwise they would not get that increased funding for healthcare response.
Well, and it was even a little bit more petty here in Alberta, as came out in the Emergencies Act Commission. If you want to see any of our coverage, friends at home, you can go to truckercommission.com. But in Alberta, it was even more petty because Trudeau and Kenney at the time really don't like each other. And when Jason Kenney was saying, look, we don't need the Emergencies Act, please don't do this. What we do need is access to heavy haul equipment. And we know, because we've laid eyes on it out at CFB Edmonton, it's sitting there. Could we use it? Because you just can't get a tow truck to move a tractor. And secondarily, they couldn't get anybody to come. Like they towed companies with the capacity for heavy haul were not coming. The rig move companies weren't coming. The big equipment movers and excavator movers, they didn't want any part of this. They basically tried all of Western North America, and everybody said, no, we're not doing this. And so they needed access to this equipment, but they needed federal permission from the federal government, and they said no. And so, there are plenty of other ways, not just withholding federal financing and federal money for certain issues. They can get real petty if they want to, and they did. And there are plenty of other ways that they would not help a province if you didn't go along with Justin Trudeau. Just ask me, we can't get a pipeline built in this province.
Well, in that video too, he's specifically referring to this bill C-21, which is being instituted. And Sheila, you are more of the gun person than I am, as obviously your name alludes. But from banning just handguns to being a more broad range grab for the hunting rifles. Can you explain it a little bit better than me?
Sure. So that's exactly what happened. So C-21 started off as a grandfathering out of handguns, which are the most highly regulated form of firearm in this country. Anyway, you just can't go, no matter how much land I have, and I have a lot, I cannot go in the backyard and plink off my father's pistol. I have to call a bureaucrat in an office somewhere far on the east side of the country and say, hey, I want to take my pistol, which I have advanced security clearance to own, to go to the only place I'm allowed to use that. And that's at a qualified range, go straight there and come straight back. You have to call and ask permission. And so despite all those regulations on legal owners, Justin Trudeau said, those gangsters, they must be in Toronto. They've got to be jumping through all the same hoops Sheila is. So we're going to ban everybody's handguns. And then it quickly changed into assault rifles, which is a very broad term, because if I hit you with my purse, that's assault. Do I have an assault purse now, an assault weapon? Should you just charge me with assault, or should you ban my purse? That's where we're at right now. So then they started adding hunting rifles into this ban last minute. And these are hunting rifles. These are not, first of all, there's really no such thing as an assault rifle. And the initial ban of 1,500 guns in an ordering council included plenty of hunting rifles, including the Mini 14 Ranchman, the ranch rifle. It's a Mini 14. It's used for varmints. You probably wouldn't use it for a deer. It's more like a badger gun. They banned that thing too, as though the gangsters in downtown Toronto are whipping out the ranch rifle to hold up a peg. But anyway, so he shoehorns a bunch of additional hunting rifles into this. And when I say a bunch of additional, I say the majority of hunting rifles in this country, because it's a center fire semi-automatic ban, and a ban on semi-automatics with capacity of receiving a 5-round clip. So that doesn't even mean that they have a 5-round clip, but they can receive a 5-round clip. Well, that basically knocks out anything except for a few duck shotguns in the country. And so a lot of provinces, including my own, are saying we're not enforcing this. This is incompatible with our culture. These people are doing nothing wrong. We don't have the policing resources to do this. This is an urban Toronto problem. Deal with it there. Don't come after us. We didn't do anything wrong. We're following all the rules. And so provinces like Alberta, Saskatchewan, some territories, they basically said, we're advising our police forces not to enforce this. We will fight you in court. And if it comes down to it, we'll see you in court. But also there's also the notwithstanding clause where provinces can say, actually, you can do whatever you want in Ontario, but we're going to do what we want here. And so he's basically saying this unconstitutional thing that we're doing to you, you can't fight back because that's actually unconstitutional. This is where we're at with him.
And out of the same corner of his mouth, he's talking about upholding individual rights and freedoms while taking away gun rights, legal gun owner rights that don't do anything. While
making me collectively responsible for the progressive policing policies of Toronto, which were set in motion by Bill Blair, the chief gun grabber in this country under the Liberals. He's protecting my individual rights by snatching my lawfully acquired property. Like, where's my property rights here? We really don't have it in Canada, but I also have the right to be presumed innocent. And I am being assigned collective guilt because of, I don't know, illegally trafficked guns in Ontario that come across a border Justin Trudeau refuses to close. I think a fence is a lot cheaper solution than snatching, I would guess, 500,000 SKSs out of the hands of the lawful owners in this country. And that's just one model of gun that he plans to grab.
I like that use of the collective guilt. That seems to be permeating many different segments of the society in Justin Trudeau's Canada. So let's go to an ad break, and then we'll come back to some more Alberta specific political speak.
Oh, she's back.
If you want to look good and shine like me, you can do so at our store. Go to ribbonnewstore.com. On this website, you have so much different style to wear, as this one, my favorite one, Justin Castro. With my code Alexa10, you will have 10% off on your next purchase. So don't hesitate, go now and look so good like me.
So
that's one of our top sellers, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I like that her ad too. Like, you'll look so good like me.
The resemblance truly is uncanny.
Yeah, I don't want to cast aspersions, and maybe it's just like all communists look the same. but boy, looking pretty familiar there.
So now we have the NDP Rachel Notley is rearing her head again in the province of Alberta. Do you want to enlighten us?
Yes, she's back, although she never really went away. And of course, she's got the support of the mainstream media. By the way, maybe we could, I know it's not on the agenda, but we really need to touch on CBC getting this, like, Daniel Smith is meddling with the Crown Prosecution Office story completely wrong, because they did an examination of the records and there's actually no communications between the Premier's office and the Crown Prosecution's office. Where did CBC get that? I just made it up out of the ether, or did their friends in the NDP feed them a story that wasn't true, knowing that they would run it without fact checking it? Maybe that should give you enough information to dig that up. Olivia. Anyways, Rachel Notley, our NDP leader, who was our province was cursed with the NDP for about 4 years. They brought in a carbon tax they didn't campaign on almost instantly. They brought in all these weird progressive policies in the education system that basically stomped all over parents' rights. They attacked homeschooling because for a lot of parents, that was their only way out of the progressive nonsense. They spent out of control. They shuttered our coal mines. So we didn't have capacity on the grid, which results in us frequently buying coal-fired electricity from Wyoming and Montana, our good neighbors. And we are the Saudi Arabia of clean coal. We've got like 800 years of clean burning coal, just like falling out of the ground everywhere. It literally falls out of the ground everywhere you go. That's one thing I don't think people realize about Alberta is the oil sands leach out of the riverbanks. Coal falls out of the ground. You kick the ground, and there could be coal there. And we have people in Ottawa saying, no, don't use that. Don't use that. Use this stuff that definitely doesn't work, like green energy. But anyways, Rachel Notley's back. She's campaigning, and she's really, this is an interesting choice here, because she wants to bring Filipino language culture curriculum into the Alberta education system. Now, I might actually agree with her here. And I'll tell you why. Because this makes more sense to me than forcing Albertans to learn French. Because it depends on where you live. We actually have a really big Filipino culture here. In the same way that my kids at school, they can take Ukrainian as a second language because of all the Ukrainian settlement here. Again, makes cultural sense, more cultural sense than French, where we're at. But anyways, let's roll this clip about Rachel Notley, and I'll tell you why I think this is a bit of a hilarious fail given her policies.
You know, back in when we were in government, we announced that we would introduce the Filipino language culture curriculum all across Alberta for any part of the province that wanted to introduce it. We understand that there's well over 200,000 people of Filipino background and heritage in Alberta, and we know, just like you say, that being able to connect with your language and your culture is better for family, better for growth, better intellectually. It's also better economically. It makes us that welcoming destination for more and more people all over the world.
I am Desiree Juan. I just moved in with my two daughters and of course my family last year in Canada, and I am very blessed to be here. My concern is that because my two daughters are bilingual, they speak the Filipino and English. When they went to school here in the South, there's no curriculum for the Filipino language and culture. So it is more of we teach them that. But it is beneficial if we have support for them, because the classmates of my girls are asking whether they can help them learn the Tagalog language and of course be imbibed with that culture.
So we're very proud to announce today that even though the UCP eliminated that program right after they got elected in 2019, should we earn the privilege of getting reelected, we will restart the work to get that Filipino language and culture curriculum started and finished so that families all across Alberta can access it to build their culture and to build Alberta as an inclusive and
diverse. There it is.
There it is. But the lady who she talked to answered the reason why the program was cut. First of all, at the time we were broke. But also the lady's like, yeah, we teach them the language and culture at home. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, great.
Okay, perfect.
That's how it should be.
Okay. So yeah, but I get that like I said, there's a large Filipino population here, 200,000 people of Filipino descent out of 4 million Albertans. That's quite a bit, actually. But this lady said, we teach the language and culture at home. Okay, that's like how it is for everybody else. Perfect. But before Rachel Notley cozies up to the Filipino community, I just want to point out that that might not be a good choice for her politically, since they are very socially conservative. 90% of Filipinos are practicing Catholics. And you noticed it in the language that the lady used. She said, I'm really blessed to be in Alberta. Yeah, she's using the language of Christianity, even as she's talking to Rachel Notley. And Rachel Notley, if she's elected, she's going to bring in policies that directly attack Filipino culture by overlaying progressive nonsense on it when these kids are trying to go to Catholic schools, which is exactly what Notley did last time.
Yeah, it's very tumultuous time in Alberta to see that stark contrast between Danielle Smith and someone like Rachel Notley. What are your predictions moving forward with this, Sheila? I mean, I know what you would hope for, but
yeah,
you could give us a teaser prediction.
You know, Danielle Smith is up against a lot. And I think the previous UCP government obviously didn't do her any favors because Jason Kenney hung on for too long. So a lot of people were really sour on the UCP. People on the right and people on the left really soured on the party. And so she's got to rebuild some of the trust that Jason Kenney nuked by hanging on a little too long. He knew he was universally unliked within the party and without. And he just hung on long enough, I guess, to sabotage her. I don't know why he did it, frankly, because at the end of the day, the only people who truly pay the price is Albertans. And Notley has the media cheering for her. And if I were Justin Trudeau, I definitely want Rachel Notley, my loyal soldier, elected here in Alberta. She literally did everything he wanted, didn't fight a single thing that he did to us. Nothing. Didn't fight for a pipeline or anything. The thing is, Danielle Smith, she's got to get either Edmonton or Calgary and all of the rural regions. She will get all of the rural regions. I think she's going to get Calgary too. Edmonton is largely a write-off, although the federal Conservatives are quite strong there. And their party apparatus, their infrastructure, their volunteer infrastructure is very strong. And I'm sure they'll deploy it to support her in the election campaign. But she's up against Trudeau and the media and the horrific NDP and all the unions. So uphill battle, but I think she's going to pull it off. I think it's going to be close, not as close as the media would like, but I think she's going to pull it off.
It really is a machine when you're up against the media coupled with the government. And now this Liberal NDP coalition on the federal level, it really is a fierce machine. But there's 4 years of prior devastation caused by the Notley NDP government. I mean, do you think Albertans remember?
I think so. I think also as we get closer to the election, which is in May, so gosh, that's getting close. That's getting close. But I think there's going to be a lot of, if I were to predict from the UCP, a lot of, hey, remember when there were routine reports of 800 layoffs in the oil patch every day? Like, you would wake up in the morning and you'd be like, oh, Husky just laid off another 800. Oh, they cleared out everybody in their Calgary office on 3 floors. Like it was, if your husband didn't get laid off, you had survivor's guilt because you knew a bunch of other women and families who were like, I don't know how we're going to get by, because not only is his job gone, but there's no other job to go to. Right. So, and we lost a lot of, they talk about brain drain in like medicine, where doctors go to the United States where there's more money to be made. We were getting a lot of expertise drain where Canadian people in the oil patch were like, you know what? I'm going to Kazakhstan. I'm a geologist. I'm going there. I'm going to work and I'm just going to make money. And so now we're playing catch up as things start to boom because the price of oil is high. Thanks in no small part to the war in Ukraine. And things are happening. Things are getting good here in Alberta. And, you know, it's one of those places people want to live, like that Filipino lady. She wants to live here. That's the story of everybody who ever came here.
Heck, I want to live there.
Yeah. You know, and I'm an evangelist for people moving here. Just leave your horrible politics behind. If you're coming from a progressive place, what do they say? Don't, California, my Texas, same thing. Don't Toronto, my Calgary.
The reason for leaving would be to separate from that Toronto cluster of the far left. They're really radical there. Just driving into Toronto just gives me heebie-jeebies. Like, it's just bad vibes.
It's a strange place.
It really is. Yeah. And just concrete jungle, but there's no jungle part, but it is wild because you never know when you're going to get attacked.
That's true.
So we have a couple more topics to get through. And before we go to an ad break, I just wanted to pull up this New York Post article that says that people should drink less coffee to combat climate change.
I'm doing a video on this. I had to.
Are you okay? I wasn't sure if it was written up. I knew you were doing something with it.
Oh yeah, I have to.
Yeah, this is so ludicrous. I don't know if you have anything more to add to it, but the one part in particular that stood out to me is that the study also found that using coffee pods to brew coffee contributed less to the carbon footprint than brewing coffee with a traditional filter. So, you know, those little compact coffee pods, which they obviously didn't study at all, the difference between a plastic manufactured pod and a paper biodegradable filter, right? They didn't study those two very important pieces to brewing coffee. They only studied the coffee brewing process. And the craziest thing to me, and I've said it before on other live streams, but I actually went to university and I have a minor in sustainable design. So I studied all of these fruity green initiatives and the sustainable design and development, and this was really ingrained into me, but also like much of it didn't make sense, so which is why I never pursued a career in any of that. But one thing that we often had to do, which is where I pointed out a lot of in a lot of assignments, I thought critically, and my teachers were like, well, you're not wrong, but I can't give you a high grade because this doesn't suit like what we were going for in this class. So one thing is doing a life cycle analysis. So you would take like a material or a product or whatever, and you would analyze its life cycle from start to finish, i.e. where it ends up in a landfill. And I find it extremely hard to believe that a manufactured from start to finish plastic coffee pod has a lower carbon footprint than something that will readily biodegrade after like a year versus something that's going to sit in a landfill for, I would imagine, at least 200 years before it biodegrades, not to mention all of the resources that went into manufacturing a plastic coffee pod versus just a regular coffee paper filter.
Yeah, and it highlights the absurdity of even trying to analyze this stuff. Just drink your coffee if you want to drink coffee and not worry about how it affects the climate. Because coffee comes from far away. Like there's no like locally grown coffee. There might be locally roasted coffee wherever you are, but it has to come to you from far away. Did I freeze up a little bit? It has to come to you from far away, and then it has to be roasted and then packaged, then shipped to you. So if you care about carbon footprint at all, maybe don't drink coffee. But again, the absurdity of even trying to analyze this. So then on the flip side, you have to boil a big pot of water and then heat that big pot of water for however long it takes you to drink an entire pot of coffee, if that's what you're doing. Or you could just brew exactly what you want with the pod. So does that get put into the analysis? Or are you like me? Do you not even care? And I'm not going to take any advice from people who routinely have their vegan vegetables driven to them and refrigerated on a truck from Southern California up here to Northern Alberta, so they can say, I don't eat meat because I worry about my carbon footprint. Look at me, I'm so virtuous. And I'm like, well, I don't remember any avocado farms around here, my friend. So
can you imagine if Starbucks caught wind of this, right? Like they're all about the virtues and pandering to the carbon footprints. And I mean, if you try to tell anybody who's a regular Starbucks consumer, which fits that demographic quite perfectly, 100%. Oh my gosh, the mental gymnastics needed to justify their Starbucks coffee is just going to be throwing them right for a loop.
Well, it's the same mental gymnastics that people with a plastic iced coffee cup with the plastic lid, same mental gymnastics they go through when they stuff that paper straw down the top of that cup. And they're like, look, I'm saving the planet. Greta, aren't you proud of me? And I'm like, no, you're going to drink paper mache in about 7 minutes from now. I hope you feel good about yourself.
You're literally drinking paper now. That must be super healthy for you. But I'm glad we're saving the turtles, although this plastic cup's just going to end up right in there. And the plastic cups have much more material than a minor straw. I actually carry my own straws around now if I have to go somewhere. And they'll be like, oh, I'll give you, they actually offer sometimes at drive-through windows two paper straws, because they're like, by the time you get through this drink, your straw is going to have disintegrated. So here's another one. And I'm like, how is this helpful to the environment? We're now giving out two instead of just one. I guess because they do disintegrate. But anyway, now I just carry my own plastic straws. So I guess it's better for the company's bottom line anyway.
The one that really gets me is the paper straws at the movie theater. So I don't drink pop, but I don't know. I'm not militant about it. I will let the kids order a pop at the movie theater. I'm not crazy. And so they get like a big, huge pop to last them 2 hours through a movie. And then you stick a paper straw in there and you're like,
done.
It instantly just gross.
Where did my straw go? It's just in there now.
Yeah. I don't know. It's one of the dumbest things society has ever done. And I think they're going to look back in like 100 years and be like, what on earth were those people thinking? This is like the scientific equivalent of like measuring people's heads for lumps to see what their personalities are. This is that unscientific, I think. And we're going to be like, how superstitious were they that they thought this was saving the planet and stopping sea turtles from losing an eye somewhere?
I always go to what the long-term health effects are going to be of just consuming minute bits of paper through a drink for however many years until it takes us to just bring back the plastic straw.
Do you know that's when they got rid of it? Remember? I'm older than you, so you don't remember, but I'm old enough to remember the first go around of paper bags. And then they were like, no, we got to go to plastic because we're saving the trees. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. Not that I believe in saving the trees, but I think trees are probably better used for building materials and lumber and all those sorts of things than carrying my groceries. So they went to plastic and I was like, yep. And you know what? You can recycle plastic, although I think recycling is a bit of a scam when you look at the cost benefit analysis, but I'm pro incineration, like turning your garbage into electricity. beautiful. I think that's makes perfect sense. So like these ideas come around again and again, and they get sold to us for stupid ideas. And like I said, I'm old enough to remember when they told me use plastic to save the earth. Now they're telling me use paper to save the earth. I can't wait till we get back on plastic.
It's like fashion trends, but socio-political trends that just come every 20 years or so.
Yeah. Acid wash of science.
All right, let's go to one more ad break and we'll come back to discuss some COVID healthcare.
Great.
Have you checked out the fresh new swag we have at rebelnewsstore.com? Like this nifty resistance trucker sweater. We have warm, cozy sweaters, t-shirts, mugs, hats, phone cases, you name it. Everything to fit your freedom-loving needs, or maybe even trigger a liberal family member or friend. And for a limited time, you can use code TAMARA10 at checkout to save 10% off of your total order. So head on over to rebelnewsstore.com, check out all of our new designs, make some purchases, and use code TAMARA, that's TAMARA 10 at checkout for 10% off your order. Head on over, check it out. Those are my favorite sweaters.
That's a great ad, by the way. Yeah, really well done.
Thank you. I really, the addition of the screaming liberal, really key.
The honking.
Really key
I like the
one.
honking. There's like a random honk in there when the hat comes down. And I burst out laughing every time I hear him.
It's not a one-woman show here. We have a whole team behind us that helps with those sorts of little finishing touches, and they really make the final production stand out. So thank you for all of the unnamed folk behind the scenes who don't get the recognition for their hard work, because it's equally as important. Yeah. So I guess we can throw right to this Twitter clip. So over the weekend, I attended this gathering of healthcare workers at a church in Port Perry, Ontario. And it was really, the whole event was really being orchestrated by a CTV News journalist who was a self-prescribed hypochondriac, if you can believe it. Avis Favero, I hope I'm pronouncing her last name correctly. Yeah. She's one of CTV's health correspondents, apparently an independent or some sort of contractor, not exclusive to CTV News, although I beg to differ. But she was leading the discussion here at this church, and it was mostly to do with healthcare workers who have remained unemployable due to the continued enforcement of vaccine mandates as we face here in Ontario. And, you know, largely in other provinces as well. This isn't an exclusive issue to our province, but here we face an exacerbated healthcare staffing crisis. And so these healthcare workers were gathering in solidarity, and also to try to get the ears of the mainstream media to say, hey, we're ready, willing, and able to work, but we can't because some bureaucrats sitting up in the Ontario Hospital Association think that, or believe that COVID-19 vaccination policies should be continued. And so I posted a couple of clips on Twitter, and we're going to show one here where the crowd laughs at the mainstream media journalist Avis kind of pushing back on the fact that they're not rule followers, that they broke the rules by not complying with these mandates.
August of 2021, Doug Ford put a mandate out with the health minister saying that all healthcare workers must be vaccinated.
But they dropped it.
No, they did. However, let me just clear the air. The hospitals got on board. They started implementing their policies. And the 11th hour, Doug Ford pulled the vaccine mandate. However, the hospitals followed through. They had everything in place. And that's what happened to my friend. He lost his job in his early 30s, a very, very skilled paramedic, a young guy with 3 young kids. And that's wrong.
On the flip side, before we go to some other comments, I just want to say, many other health workers responded to vaccine mandates by getting the vaccines in order to continue working. And they're there. So people might look at you and say you didn't follow rules.
Yes, they do. It's a kill shot.
How many are working with COVID?
Yeah, the real rules are that we're supposed to give informed consent.
Right. The rules are supposed to be based on science. Like, so a 2-year-old shot, why would I get it now?
If it's not working. It's not working. It's not stopping transmission.
So in terms of how we feel, I feel badly for patients who aren't getting timely care. I was feeling sorry for my colleagues left behind, but I think it's now time for them to speak up. My sympathy is actually... When I say nurses, I'm including everybody, because it takes everybody to run a hospital. But, you know, some of them are still lining up for their jobs because they completely think it's a good thing to do. Others, though, are not. They got their 2 shots in my hospital. They don't have to get another one. They know it wasn't right. They know what happened to me was wrong. But let's speak up. Before I was fired, I spoke with my leader. And basically, at the end of our conversation, like I said, well, so do something. You feel sorry about this. It's wrong. Do something. I can't. They won't listen to me. I have a wedding to pay for. I have a house to pay for. And I'm like, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and the conversation that kind of ensued thereafter was the fact that many healthcare workers were literally in tears, crying, saying, I don't want this, but I don't think that I have any other choice here unless I want to lose my livelihood, lose my house, not be able to feed my kids, not be gainfully employed anywhere else. I don't want this, but I don't know what else to do. So I'm here, just give me this shot, as they're literally crying, not wanting to comply. And the other thing that was really stood out to me in this coverage, it was really interesting to contrast the coverage between what Lincoln, our video journalist, and I were doing versus what Avis and her video cameraman were doing. It was clear that they really had one specific narrative in mind. So they wanted to cover the fact that there were ready, willing, and able healthcare workers who are being prevented from doing their jobs amid an increasing staffing crisis that's obviously adversely affecting patients. At the end of the day, the patients are the ones that suffer the most. And so there was some people in there that wanted to get into the science and why this mandate and continued enforcement of this policy doesn't make sense and why it never did. And I mean, there should be a clear discussion here against morality and science, but Avis actually stated on stage there, and we probably have a clip somewhere in Lincoln's recordings, that she wasn't interested in discussing the science. She wasn't there to cover any of the science or do any of those discussions. She just wanted to hear from anecdotal accounts from healthcare workers who remained ousted from employment. And so they really drove the discussion in one way that they had a narrative to fill. Whereas when we go and cover events, I mean, sometimes you'll have questions in mind, or you'll look at the current political landscape. So you have a bit of an angle in mind. But I went there that afternoon ready to hear and listen to the experiences and the thoughts from healthcare workers, and see what the overall feel and angle of their gathering was. That's how I usually go into events. What are the people in there saying? Why was it important to be there? Why are they gathering? What are they doing? And what's their message? What are they hoping to get across? And that's how we typically cover events. Whereas the mainstream media goes in there and they have a narrative in mind. They have an angle that they want to go, and any deterrence from that is just simply not allowed.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that she thought there was some sort of moral superiority in blind rule following unquestioningly. Yeah, like when she's at the pulpit, interesting shot, by the way, preaching, evangelizing the good word of just going along to get along. And she couldn't understand why people decided to do something different for themselves. And while she doesn't want to make it about the science of it, I understand why she wouldn't, because the science does not support forcing vaccine mandates and keeping these nurses unemployed. The science doesn't support it anymore. So of course you don't want to discuss that, because then that means that everybody who forced those things were wrong, and the people who chose something different for themselves were ultimately right. They were the smartest people in the room. Avis Favreau, she has been with CTV as their medical reporter forever. I wonder if they're doing an episode of W5 on this, because that's normally where she sort of her long form journalism lands, is W5, which isn't terrible sometimes. It's not great either. if you're going to watch a CTV product, W5 has sometimes some balanced journalism, but seeing what I see here, I'm not so sure. Maybe we're all just getting snowed. But yeah, she's won like multiple awards for her medical journalism. And I think that's because you probably can't name another medical journalist in this country outside of yourself.
Well, actually, and her report did come out. So it came out Sunday night at 10 p.m. So whoever is up at that time of in the evening to watch it. But, it was pretty fair. I have to give credit where credit is due. The article itself, and I think it ended up being, roughly a 3-minute video that they did that featured a couple of the voices of those healthcare workers. And it was pretty fair. They did receive fair representation. And I mean, to that, I would say it's about time. But also I asked Avis at the event, if she was enlightened at all, if she learned anything new, if she received any insight that she didn't already or otherwise know. And she said something really interesting to me. And of course, she had no interest in talking to me, didn't want to give a comment. But what she said to me was that she was a bit surprised at, and she didn't use this word, but alluded to, that the crowd was so rowdy. And that she's used to talking to healthcare professionals who are more quiet and reserved. And it really made me think that they have been quiet and reserved, right? They were silenced, smeared, and slandered if they spoke out. And so these healthcare professionals have really been just in the background, unless you knew where to search them out or how to connect into their group, you didn't otherwise hear from them. And so now they have a chance to finally have their voices heard. I mean, are we surprised that they're going to express frustration and emotions are going to be running high? This is 2.5 years coming.
Yeah. These people, they made a medical choice that they were right about, and they still stand to lose everything. Like time has proven them right, and yet they're still being punished instead of has anybody ever even said, I'm sorry to you? Mm-hmm. Like, I will say to Danielle Smith, she did say she was sorry to the medical workers who were fired over vaccine mandates in this province, and she welcomed them all back to work. But in Ontario, they never even got I'm sorry we discriminated against you, not even, and I'm sorry we fired you because you were right and we were wrong. They haven't even gotten that.
Well, and I wonder if they start to backtrack on some of these policies, especially the most heavy-handed ones, which happened, sadly, in the healthcare sector and hospitals and long-term care homes, that's just going to generate a pile-up of wrongful dismissal causes. Because if they renege now and they backpedal on this policy that never honored anyone's exemptions, despite the directive that originally did come from the government, it was Directive 6. It in there stipulated exemptions and that how to deal with them and that they should be honored and appropriate PPE and other measures to be put in place if exemptions are being sought after. But these hospital administrators, and it's being found that it's largely likely due to the Ontario Hospital Association's directives, decided to disregard anyone seeking an exemption and instead just vaccinate or be terminated. End of story. Yeah. So this last story that we have, I don't think is YouTube safe. It discusses some vaccine injury. And I mean, it's trickling out in the mainstream now. So maybe YouTube's going to go ahead and change some of their community standards. But should we say bye to YouTube before discussing this one, Sheila?
I think we probably should, just to be on the safe side, because they've been particularly sticky about some of the stuff that we confronted Albert Bourla on, and they would love to silence us after we embarrassed their sugar daddy on the global scale.
All right. So if you're joining us on YouTube, we will be disconnecting from YouTube. Head on over to Rumble, Odyssey, or Getter and join us for our last few minutes of discussion there, because we're going to talk about some adverse events. We'll give a moment here. Let us know, Olivia, when